The sky burned orange on the day the Draxith came to Cathara Prime. Commander Yellen Vasquez was eating breakfast in the small security station when the alarm started screaming. She dropped her coffee and ran to the window. What she saw made her blood turn cold. Hundreds of dark ships were falling through the clouds like metal rain. They blocked out the sun itself. Cathara Prime was a peaceful world. It was a farming colony where humans and Velesi lived together, growing food and raising families. The Velesi were tall and thin, with blue-gray skin and large, dark eyes. They were gentle people who had welcomed humans to their world 50 years ago. Together, they had built something beautiful. Now the beauty was dying. Vasquez grabbed her communication device and called her security team. She had only 200 soldiers under her command. They were meant to handle small problems like pirates or criminals. They were not meant to fight an invasion. The Draxith were slavers. Everyone in the galaxy knew their name and feared it. They were massive creatures, standing 8 feet tall with thick armor-like skin and forearms. For 10,000 years, they had taken what they wanted from weaker species. They captured people and sold them like animals. The Galactic Council did nothing to stop them because the Council was afraid. The first Draxith landing ships hit the ground near the capital city. Vasquez watched on her screens as Draxith soldiers poured out, firing weapons at anyone who ran. People fell in the streets. Families were torn apart. Children screamed for parents who could not help them. Governor Talani, the Velesi leader of the colony, sent a desperate message to the Galactic Council. She begged them to send help. She told them millions of innocent people were being slaughtered. The Council's response came within the hour. "We regret the situation on Cathara Prime," the message said. However, this system falls within Draxith sovereign territory claims. Intervention would risk broader conflict. We advise negotiation and compliance. Vasquez read the message 3 times. She could not believe what she was seeing. The Council was abandoning them. 2 million people were being captured and killed, and the galaxy's leaders had decided it was not their problem. She did not have time for anger. She had to save whoever she could. The old mining tunnels beneath the Velther Mountains had been abandoned for decades. They stretched for hundreds of miles underground, a maze of passages and caverns. Vasquez ordered her soldiers to guide civilians there. It was their only hope. For 3 days, the evacuation continued. Vasquez and her people worked without sleep, leading groups of terrified colonists through the forests and into the mountains. The Draxith were everywhere, hunting in packs, grabbing anyone they found. Their ships flew overhead, scanning for life signs. Vasquez lost soldiers every day. Good men and women who died holding back Draxith patrols so civilians could escape. She memorized each name, each face. She promised herself she would remember them. On the 3rd night, she found a group of Velesi children hiding in a destroyed school. There were 42 of them, the youngest only 4 years old. Their teachers had been taken. Their parents were gone. They had nothing left but fear. A little girl with silver blue skin grabbed Vasquez's hand. "Are you going to save us?" she asked. Vasquez looked into those large, dark eyes. She wanted to cry. She wanted to scream at the unfairness of it all. Instead, she squeezed the small hand and nodded. "Yes," she said. "I'm going to save you." She carried 2 children on her back for the 12-mile journey to the tunnels. Her soldiers carried others. They moved through the darkness, avoiding Draxith patrols by inches. When they finally reached the tunnel entrance, Vasquez counted the children 3 times to make sure none were missing. By the end of the first week, the surface belonged to the Draxith completely. Vasquez sealed the main tunnel entrances with explosives and hoped the enemy would not find the hidden ones. She gathered the survivors and counted them. There were 47,000 people in the tunnels. Most were Velesi. About 8,000 were human. They had some food from emergency supplies, some water from underground streams, and almost no hope at all. Before the last entrance was sealed, Vasquez managed to send one final message to Earth. The signal was weak and broken, but she prayed it would reach someone. "This is Commander Yellen Vasquez. Kethra Prime Security Force," she said into the device. "Colony is lost. Draxith occupation in progress. 47,000 survivors in hiding. Council has refused help. Coordinates attached." She paused, her voice breaking. "They're taking everyone. Please, someone, help us." Then the entrance sealed, and darkness swallowed them. The tunnels were cold and damp. The survivors huddled together for warmth. Humans and Valesi mixed together with no thought of species. Fear made everyone equal. Vasquez organized her remaining soldiers and established a command post in a large cavern. She did the math in her head. Their food would last 3 weeks if they were very careful. Water was less of a problem, but food would kill them before the Draxith did. An elderly Valesi named Korath approached her on the second day underground. He had been a farmer on the surface, growing grain that fed thousands. Now he was just another refugee. "Commander," he said quietly, "do you truly believe help will come?" Vasquez looked at him for a long moment. She thought about lying. She thought about giving him false hope. But she respected him too much for that. "I don't know," she admitted. "Earth is very far away. Even if they received my message, even if they want to help, it would take months for a fleet to reach us." Korath nodded slowly. "Then we may die here." "Maybe," Vasquez said. "But we will not die as slaves. And we will not die without a fight." She looked around the cavern at the thousands of faces watching her. Valesi and human, old and young, all of them waiting for someone to tell them what to do. Waiting for hope, Vasquez climbed onto a rock so everyone could see her. She was not good at speeches. She was a soldier, not a politician. But these people needed something to hold on to. "I know you are afraid," she said, her voice echoing off the stone walls. "I am afraid too. But fear does not mean we give up. As long as we breathe, we fight. We survive. And we wait. Because somewhere out there, someone heard our call. Someone is coming." She did not know if she believed her own words, but she saw people straighten their backs. She saw parents hold their children a little tighter. She saw hope, small and fragile, light up in tired eyes. Thought it would have to be enough. 6 weeks passed in the darkness beneath the mountains. Vasquez had stopped counting the days by sunlight because there was no sun underground. Instead, she counted by deaths, by the dwindling food supplies, by the hollow look in children's eyes when they went to bed hungry for the 20th night in a row. The tunnels had become a strange underground city. People slept in small groups, pressing together for warmth on the cold stone floors. The air smelled of sweat and fear, and something else that Vasquez tried not to think about. The smell of people slowly starving. Kira was 14 years old when the Draxith came. She had lost her mother in the first attack, watched her father get dragged away by soldiers, and seen her little brother disappear into a slave ship. She should have been broken. Instead, something hard and sharp had grown inside her. She started following Vasquez everywhere. At first, the commander tried to send her away, but Kira kept coming back. She watched how Vasquez moved, how she talked, how she made decisions. She asked questions constantly. Why do humans fight when they cannot win? Kira asked one night. Vasquez was checking their weapon supplies. They were almost empty. Because sometimes the fight is more important than winning, she said. That does not make sense. No, Vasquez agreed. It doesn't, but it's who we are. Kira thought about this for a long time. She decided she wanted to be that kind of person too. The food situation grew worse every day. Vasquez organized night raids to the surface, sending small teams to scavenge from the ruins of settlements. It was incredibly dangerous. Draxith patrols were everywhere, and their sensors could detect movement from miles away. The first raid brought back enough food for 3 days. The second raid brought back less. On the third raid, Vasquez lost 4 soldiers to a Draxith ambush. She had to make the decision to leave their bodies behind. It broke something inside her, but she kept moving. She had to. During the 5th week, they intercepted a Draxith communication signal. One of the human technicians managed to decode it. What they learned made everything worse. A Galactic Council diplomatic ship had visited the system. They had spoken with the Draxith commanders about the situation. They had negotiated for reasonable treatment of the captured colonists. Then they had left. The council knew exactly what was happening. They had seen it with their own eyes. And they had done nothing except ask the slavers to be gentle while they worked people to death. Vasquez did not tell most of the survivors about this. She could not take away what little hope they had left. But she told her officers, and she saw the same fury in their eyes that she felt in her heart. The galaxy had abandoned them. They were truly alone. On day 38, an elderly Valesi man named Torith came to Vasquez. He was thin and weak. His blue skin had turned gray from lack of proper food. He was not alone. About 40 people stood behind him, mostly Valesi, a few humans. "Commander," Torith said, "we wish to surrender." Vasquez felt her stomach drop. "You know what will happen if you do. We will become slaves," Torith said. His voice was calm, accepting. "But we will live. Here, we starve. Our children cry from hunger every night. At least as slaves, they might survive." Vasquez wanted to argue. She wanted to tell him that help was coming, that they just needed to hold on a little longer. But she looked at the people behind him. She saw mothers holding babies who had stopped crying because they were too weak. She saw old men who could barely stand. She could not promise them anything. She had no right to force them to stay. "I won't stop you," she said quietly. "But please, wait 3 more days. Just 3 more days." Torith looked at her with tired, sad eyes. "Why?" "Because I'm asking you to. Because I believe someone is coming. Because I need you to trust me one more time." The old man was silent for a long moment. Then he nodded slowly. 3 days, Commander." "No more." Vasquez watched them walk away. She went to a dark corner of the tunnels and sat alone. For the first time since the invasion began, she allowed herself to cry. She thought about her family back on Earth, her mother, who had told her to be careful before she shipped out to this assignment, her brother, who had joked that farming colonies were boring and she would die of boredom. She wondered if they knew what had happened. She wondered if they were mourning her already. She thought about the 200 soldiers who had served under her. 63 were still alive. The rest had died protecting civilians, buying time with their lives so others could escape. They had trusted her, and she had led them into a nightmare. Day 41. The last of the emergency food was distributed. Each person received a small portion that would not satisfy a child, let alone an adult. Tomorrow, there would be nothing. Day 42. Vasquez gathered her officers for a final meeting. She proposed something she had never thought she would suggest: a suicide assault. The remaining soldiers would attack the nearest Draxith base, causing as much damage as possible. They would die, but they would die fighting. "We can't save everyone," she said, her voice flat. "But we can make them remember us. We can show them that humans don't surrender." Her officers agreed. They would launch the attack at dawn. Underground, dawn was just a number on a clock, but it felt right somehow. Day 43. Vasquez sat in a collapsed mineshaft, alone with her thoughts. In a few hours, she would lead her people to their deaths. It was not how she had imagined her life ending, but at least it would mean something. A small hand touched her shoulder. Kira stood there, her large dark eyes reflecting the dim emergency lights. "Commander," the girl said, "you need to see the sky." Vasquez almost laughed. "There is no sky down here, Kira. Please, come with me." Something in the girl's voice made Vasquez follow. They moved through the tunnels, past sleeping refugees, past guards who looked at them with curious eyes. They reached a hidden observation point, a small crack in the mountain that looked out over the valley below. Vasquez looked up at the sky, and her breath stopped. The Draxith blockade was burning. Ships that had hung in orbit for 6 weeks, untouchable and eternal, were breaking apart. Explosions blossomed in the darkness like deadly flowers. Something was tearing through them, something fast and merciless and completely unstoppable. And falling through the flames, dozens of objects descended toward the surface. They would drop pods, painted in black and gold. Vasquez recognized those colors. Every human knew those colors. United Earth Navy. Her legs gave out. She fell to her knees, tears streaming down her face as more and more pods fell from the sky. They were not alone anymore. They had never been alone. Kira knelt beside her. "Commander, what is happening?" Vasquez laughed and cried at the same time. "Help," she whispered. "Help is here." She stood on shaking legs and ran back into the tunnels, screaming for everyone to wake up. People stumbled from their sleeping places, confused and frightened. Vasquez climbed onto a rock, her face wet with tears, her voice breaking with emotion. "They came," she shouted. "Earth came for us. The Navy is here." For a moment, there was silence. Then someone started crying. Then someone else started laughing. Then everyone was doing both, embracing each other, falling to their knees, looking up as if they could see through solid rock to the sky above. The message had reached home, and humanity had answered. The Galactic Council had made a mistake about humans. They thought humans were a young species, barely 1,000 years into space travel. They thought humans were traders and engineers, good at building things but nothing special in warfare. They thought humans were weak because humans smiled often and preferred peace. They were wrong. Admiral Chen Wei stood on the bridge of the UN Thermopylae, watching the Draxith blockade die. His fleet had crossed 200 light-years in 6 weeks, using technology the Council did not know existed. 37 ships had made the journey, carrying 20,000 Marines, and enough firepower to crack a planet. They had not come to negotiate. Chen was 63 years old. He had served in the Navy for 40 years, fighting pirates and protecting colonies. He had never fired on another species in anger. He had hoped he never would. But when the distress signal from Kethra Prime reached Earth, when he saw the footage of Draxith soldiers dragging children into slave ships, something ancient and terrible woke up inside him. Humans remembered being slaves. Humans remembered chains and whips and being treated like property. They had sworn it would never happen again, not to themselves and not to anyone they could protect. The Draxith commander was named Krolveth. He was a veteran of hundreds of slave raids, responsible for the capture of millions of beings across dozens of worlds. When he saw the human fleet emerge from slipspace, he laughed. "These creatures dare challenge us," he said to his officers. "Signal them. Tell them to leave or be destroyed." Admiral Chen received the message. His response was broadcast on all frequencies, in every language. To the Draxith forces occupying Kethra Prime, you have 1 hour to release all captives and withdraw from the system. This is not a negotiation. This is a countdown. Krolveth laughed again. "They threaten us?" The Draxith? We have ruled this galaxy for 10,000 years. Send fighters to destroy their lead ship. Let them learn fear. 300 Draxith fighters launched toward the Thermopylae. Chun watched them come on his tactical display. He did not move. He did not give orders to evade. He simply waited. The human point defense systems activated when the fighters were 3,000 kilometers away. Thousands of small turrets tracked targets and fired. Lasers and projectiles filled space with a web of death. In 90 seconds, every Draxith fighter was destroyed. Krolvez stopped laughing. All ships, attack formation, he ordered. Destroy them. The Draxith fleet numbered 80 vessels, including their massive flagship. They were confident in their numbers, confident in their power. They had never lost a fleet battle. Admiral Chun checked his clock. 57 minutes remained on his countdown. The Draxith commander had chosen violence. Very well. Fire the hammer, Chun said calmly. Deep in the belly of the Thermopylae, a weapon activated. It was simple in concept, but terrifying in execution. A tungsten rod, 2 meters long, accelerated to 3% of light speed by magnetic rails. At that velocity, it carried the energy of a small nuclear bomb. The Draxith flagship was 10,000 kilometers away. The hammer crossed that distance in 1 second. The flagship did not explode. It simply ceased to exist, transformed into expanding vapor and debris. Krolvez died without understanding what had killed him. The battle lasted 4 hours. The Draxith fought hard because that was all they knew how to do. But they had never faced an enemy like this. Human ships moved in perfect coordination, covering each other, concentrating fire with ruthless efficiency. Human weapons struck targets before the Draxith could react. When it was over, not a single Draxith warship remained in orbit. The human fleet had lost 2 ships and 437 sailors. Chun ordered their names recorded. They would be remembered. The ground assault began at dawn. Drop pods fell like meteors, carrying Marines in powered armor. Gunships followed, providing air support. The humans were not alone. Volunteers from 12 different species had joined the fleet, beings who had suffered under Draxith cruelty and wanted to fight back. Captain Maria Torres led the first wave. She was 31 years old, born on Mars, trained for exactly this kind of mission. Her squad hit the ground near the largest slave camp and immediately came under fire. Draxith ground troops were terrifying. They stood 8 feet tall, with 4 arms and natural armor that could stop small arms fire. They were bred for combat, engineered to feel no fear. For thousands of years, no one had defeated them on the ground. Torres killed 3 in the first 30 seconds. Human Marines used exoskeletons that multiplied their strength. Their rifles fired armor-piercing rounds that could punch through Draxith hide. Their training was relentless, their tactics refined by centuries of warfare. And they had something the Draxith did not understand. They fought for something greater than themselves. Vasquez led the tunnel, survivors toward the sound of battle. After 6 weeks of hiding, they were finally moving toward the light. Her remaining soldiers carried weapons, ready to join the fight. The civilians followed, hope giving them strength they should not have had. They met Captain Torres at the edge of the Velthran Mountains. Torres saw Vasquez first, recognized the security force uniform. "Commander Vasquez? We received your distress signal." "You came," Vasquez said. Her voice broke. "You actually came." "The Navy doesn't leave people behind," Torres said simply. "How many survivors?" 47,000 in the tunnels. Mostly Valesi. Torres nodded. "We'll get them out. All of them. But we need your help. Your people know this terrain." Vasquez straightened her back. "Tell us what you need." The liberation of Kethera Prime took 3 days. Human Marines and local survivors worked together, clearing Draxith positions one by one. The fighting was brutal. The enemy did not surrender, and the humans did not ask them to. Kira stayed close to Vasquez throughout the battle. She watched the human soldiers fight with a dedication she had never seen before. She saw Marines take wounds that should have killed them and keep fighting. She saw them carry injured Velesi through fire, shielding civilians with their own bodies. Why do they do this? She asked Vasquez during a quiet moment. They don't even know us. Vasquez watched a young Marine share his water with an elderly Velesi man. Because they know what slavery means, she said. Because they believe everyone deserves to be free. Because this is who humans are. The slave pens were the last objective. They were massive structures, designed to hold thousands of prisoners. The Draxith had packed them full, preparing to ship their captives to the markets. When the Marines breached the walls, they found 1.7 million colonists inside. Starving, broken, terrified, but alive. A Velasi woman fell to her knees before a young Marine who was cutting her chains. She was crying so hard she could barely speak. "Why?" she asked. "Why did you come for us?" The Marine helped her stand. He was covered in dirt and blood, exhausted from 3 days of fighting. But he smiled. "Because you called," he said. "And we don't leave people behind." That night, Vasquez stood on a hill overlooking the ruined colony. Fires still burned in the distance, but they were human fires now, burning Draxith equipment and weapons. Medical ships were landing, bringing food and medicine for the survivors. The nightmare was ending. Admiral Chun's voice came over the communication system, broadcast to everyone. "To the people of Kethra Prime, you are free. You will never be slaves again. The United Earth Navy stands with you." Somewhere in the crowd below, someone started singing. Vasquez did not recognize the song, but others joined in. Humans and Velesi singing together, their voices rising into the night sky. For the first time in 6 weeks, Vasquez allowed herself to believe they would survive. The galaxy was watching. Admiral Chun had ordered every piece of footage from Kethra, primed to be broadcast on every news channel, every network, every feed in Council space. Nothing was hidden. Nothing was softened. The galaxy saw the slave pens, packed with millions of innocent people. They saw the mass graves where the Draxith thrown those who died during capture. They saw children separated from parents, families torn apart, people branded like animals. They saw the truth of what the Draxith had done while the Council looked away, and they saw the liberation. Human Marines cutting chains, human medics treating wounds, human soldiers carrying exhausted Velesi to safety. The contrast was impossible to ignore. The Council called an emergency session. Ambassador Sarah Okonkwo represented humanity at the Council chambers. She was 54 years old, a career diplomat who had spent decades building bridges between species. She believed in peace, in cooperation, in solving problems through conversation. But she also knew that some things could not be negotiated. The Council chamber was enormous, designed to hold representatives from over 300 species. Today, it felt small and hostile. The Draxith delegation sat in their section, their massive forms radiating anger. The other species watched with expressions ranging from fear to fascination. High Councilor Vareth, a tall being with silver skin and 4 eyes, spoke first. "Ambassador Okonkwo, your military has conducted an unauthorized assault on Draxith sovereign territory. You have destroyed their fleet and killed thousands of their soldiers. This is an act of war." Okonkwo stood calmly. "High Counselor, I would like to address the Council's concerns. But first, I have evidence to present." She activated a holographic display. Images filled the chamber. A Velesi child, maybe 5 years old, being dragged from her mother's arms by a Draxith soldier. An elderly human man being beaten for walking too slowly. A mass grave containing hundreds of bodies, some still moving when the dirt was thrown over them. Several council members looked away. Others watched in horrified silence. 600,000 colonists died during the Draxith occupation, Okonkwo said, her voice steady. Another 1.7 million were held in conditions that violate every civilized standard of treatment. And 23,000 were shipped off-world to Draxith slave markets before our forces arrived. She turned to face the Draxith delegation directly. You claim sovereignty. You claim we violated your rights. But sovereignty does not grant the right to commit atrocity. And this council's refusal to act does not make those atrocities acceptable. The Draxith ambassador rose to his feet. He was enormous, even by Draxith standards, his voice deep and threatening. You dare lecture us? We have ruled the stars for 10,000 years. We were building empires when your species was living in caves. You are nothing. We were nothing, Okonkwo agreed. We were a small species on a small planet, far from the center of galactic civilization. We asked for nothing except to be left alone. But you did not leave us alone. You attacked our people. You enslaved our citizens. You made this personal. She looked around the chamber, meeting eyes with delegates from dozens of species. The council sent a diplomatic mission to Cathura Prime during the occupation. They saw what was happening. They negotiated for reasonable treatment of slaves, then left. The council chose to do nothing, because intervention would have caused greater conflict, Lurith said. We must think of the greater good. The greater good? Okonkwo's voice hardened. Tell that to the 600,000 dead. Tell that to the children who watched their parents be murdered. Tell that to the survivors who will carry these scars forever. Your greater good meant abandoning millions to suffering and death. She took a deep breath. Humanity chose differently. We will always choose differently. The Draxith ambassador slammed his fist on his desk. This is an act of war. We demand reparations. We demand the human fleet withdraw immediately. We demand the surrender of Admiral Chung for trial. Okonkwo smiled. It was not a friendly smile. You demand? After what you have done, you dare make demands? She pulled up another display. The United Earth Navy Second Fleet has taken position along your border. First Fleet has begun patrols of Council space. Third Fleet. She paused. Third Fleet's location is classified. The chamber fell silent. The Draxith ambassador sat down slowly. We are not interested in war, Okonkwo continued. We have no desire to conquer your territory or destroy your people. But understand this clearly. Any attack on human citizens or on any species under our protection will be met with overwhelming force. We will not negotiate. We will not hesitate. We will respond. High Counselor Verith shifted uncomfortably. Ambassador, surely we can find a diplomatic solution. The Council would be happy to mediate. The Council had its chance to mediate. You chose to do nothing. Okonkwo gathered her materials. Humanity no longer requires the Council's assistance. We will handle our own affairs, and we will protect those who ask for our help. That is all. She walked out of the chamber. Behind her, chaos erupted as species began arguing among themselves. The old order was breaking. Something new was being born. Within weeks, 12 species reached out to human ambassadors. The Valesi were first, offering a formal alliance in gratitude for their liberation. The Keth followed, a small species that had lost millions to Drax's slave raids over the centuries. Then the Immerans, the Toroth, the small and the vulnerable and the forgotten. They called it the Free Worlds Compact. An alliance based on a simple principle. No member would be abandoned to face danger alone. Back on Cathura Prime, Vasquez could not celebrate that she had saved 47,000 people. She should have been proud. But every night, she saw the faces of those she could not save. The 600,000 dead. And worse, the 23,000 who had been shipped away before the Navy arrived. They were still out there somewhere, in chains, waiting for rescue that might never come. She requested a meeting with Admiral Chun. They met aboard the Thermopylae, in the Admiral's private office. Chun looked tired. The victory had cost him too, she realized. Every decision he made carried weight, and some of that weight was measured in lives lost. "Commodore Vasquez," he said, using her new rank. She had been promoted for her actions during the siege. "What can I do for you?" "The 23,000, sir. The ones who were taken before you arrived. What happens to them?" Chen was quiet for a moment. Then he pulled up a star map. It showed Draxith space, a vast expanse of territory spanning hundreds of systems. "We're tracking the slave ships," he said. "Intelligence has identified several auction sites where our people might have been sold. It will take time. The hegemony is vast, and we can't simply invade without cause. So we just leave them there?" Vasquez could not keep the anger from her voice. "No." Chun highlighted a course projection that led deep into Draxith territory. "We don't leave anyone behind. Ever. That's not who we are." He met her eyes. "I'm putting together a task force. Specialized units for deep penetration missions. Raids into Draxith space to locate and rescue captives. It will be dangerous. It will take years. But we will bring them home. Every single one? Every single one." Chun smiled grimly. "The Draxith think this is over. They think we'll go back to our space and leave them alone. They're wrong. This is just the beginning." Vasquez felt something shift inside her. The grief was still there, but now it had purpose, direction. "I want in," she said. "I want to lead the task force." Chun nodded. "I was hoping you would say that. The mission is yours, Commodore. Bring our people home." Vasquez stood and saluted. She had failed to protect everyone on Cathur Prime. She would not fail again. The hunt was about to begin. 18 months had passed since the liberation of Cathur Prime, and the galaxy had changed forever. The Draxith hegemony, once the most feared power in known space, had sealed its borders. Their fleets no longer raided freely among the stars. Their slave markets operated in secret now, hidden from the eyes of the galaxy. They called it a strategic withdrawal, a choice to focus on internal matters. Everyone knew the truth. The hunters had become the hunted. The Free World's Compact had grown to include 23 species. Some were large and powerful, but most were small and vulnerable. Exactly the kind of people the Draxith had preyed upon for millennia. They came to humanity not because humans were the strongest military power in the galaxy, but because humans were the only ones who had been willing to fight. Kira stood at attention in a line of graduates, wearing the crisp uniform of the Free World's Marines. She was 19 years old now, no longer the frightened child who had followed Commander Vasquez through dark tunnels. The ceremony was being held on New Cathura, the rebuilt colony that rose from the ashes of the old one. Her instructors had told her she was the finest recruit in her class. She could outshoot most human Marines and had mastered combat tactics that officers twice her age struggled with. But she knew the real source of her strength. She had learned from watching humans refuse to surrender. She had learned what it meant to keep fighting when all hope seemed lost. Commodore. Vasquez pinned the insignia on Kira's collar herself. The Valesi woman who had once been a frightened survivor was now a legend, famous throughout the Compact for her rescue missions into Draxith space. Her task force had freed over 15,000 captives in 18 months. "You've earned this," Vasquez said quietly. "Your parents would be proud." Kira blinked back tears. "Thank you, Commander. For everything. I'm not your commander anymore, Lieutenant. Now you lead others." Vasquez smiled. Don't forget what you learned in those tunnels. The most important weapon isn't a rifle. It's the refusal to give up. Hira saluted. I won't forget. I promise. Later that day, a transport ship arrived at New Cathra's main spaceport. Vasquez was there to meet it, as she had been for dozens of similar arrivals over the past year and a half. The ramp lowered, and people began walking out. Humans and Valesi and members of other species, all of them thin and weak, all of them bearing the marks of captivity. But they were walking. They were free. A human woman in her 30s stopped when she saw the welcoming committee. Her eyes went wide, and she started crying. A moment later, a man broke from the crowd and ran to her. They embraced, falling to their knees together, sobbing so hard they could not speak. Husband and wife, reunited after 18 months apart. She had been among the 23,000 taken before the Navy arrived. He had never stopped hoping. Vasquez watched them hold each other. This was why she kept fighting. This was why she would never stop. Her datapad showed the current count. 15,412 rescued. 7,588 still missing. The numbers haunted her, but they also drove her forward. That night, deep in Drax's space, a small ship moved through an asteroid field. It was painted in dark colors, almost invisible against the black of space. The crew worked in silence, professionals who had done this many times before. The target was a hidden slave market on a moon that officially did not exist. Intelligence suggested at least 200 captives were being held there, including several humans taken from Cathora Prime. The raid was fast and brutal. Marines dropped from the ship in powered armor, cutting through security systems and guards with practiced efficiency. The Draxith had learned to fear these attacks, but they could not predict where humanity would strike next. When the fighting ended, the Marines found the prisoners exactly where intelligence said they would be. Chained, starving, waiting to be sold. A human medic began treating them immediately while soldiers cut their chains. An elderly Kethwoman grabbed a Marine's hand as he freed her. She was crying, her translator barely able to keep up with her words. We thought no one was coming. We thought we had been forgotten. The Marine helped her to her feet. No one gets forgotten, he said. Not anymore. Back on Earth, in a chamber far from the public eye, military commanders reviewed reports from across Draxith space. The slave trade was collapsing. Markets that had operated openly for centuries were shutting down or moving to more hidden locations. The supply of new captives had dropped dramatically because Draxith raiders no longer ventured beyond their borders. It's working, Admiral Chun said. He was older now, his hair fully gray, but his eyes were still sharp. The hegemony is dying. Not from our attacks, but from fear. They can't sustain their economy without slaves, and they're too afraid to capture more. How long? Asked one of the other commanders. Years, maybe decades. But the outcome is inevitable. Chun pulled up a projection showing the growth of the Free World's Compact. And every species they once preyed upon is now our ally. The balance of power has shifted permanently. He thought about the young Commodore leading raids into enemy territory. He thought about the recovered captives, the rebuilt colonies, the alliances that grew stronger every day. Humanity had never sought to rule the galaxy. They had only wanted to protect those who could not protect themselves. Sometimes, that was enough to change everything. On a Draxith world, far from the front lines, a council of war gathered. The greatest generals and leaders of the hegemony sat in a circle, arguing about what to do. Some demanded a full military assault on human space. Others insisted on negotiation, on trying to find a peaceful solution before it was too late. An ancient Draxith lord sat at the head of the table, silent while the others debated. He was over 300 years old, scarred from countless battles, wise enough to see what the younger leaders could not. Finally, he raised his hand for silence. The room went quiet. "For 10,000 years," he said, "we have taken what we wanted. We believed ourselves to be the supreme hunters of the galaxy. Every other species was prey to us, existing only for our use." He activated a display showing footage from Kethera Prime. Human ships tearing through the blockade. Marines freeing slaves. The look of absolute determination on human faces. "We were wrong," the ancient lord said. "We were never the hunters. We simply had not met the true hunters yet. The humans are not like us. They do not fight for conquest or profit. They fight because they believe it is right. And that makes them more dangerous than we ever imagined." "Then what do we do?" a young general demanded. The ancient lord was quiet for a long moment. "We survive," he said finally. "We adapt. We hope that someday the humans will find other enemies and forget about us. Because if we continue this war, we will lose. Not today, not tomorrow, but eventually they will never stop." That is not something they know how to do. The council fell silent. For the first time in 10,000 years, the Draxith were afraid. Across the galaxy, on the bridge of her ship, Commodore Vasquez watched another transport dock. Another 100 souls going home. She had stopped counting the sleepless nights, the close calls, the friends she had lost along the way. None of that mattered. Only the mission mattered. A young ensign approached her. He was fresh from the academy, eager and idealistic, reminding her of herself decades ago. "Commodore," he asked, "do you think we'll ever get them all back? Every single one?" Vasquez looked out at the stars. Somewhere out there, in the vast darkness of Draxith space, thousands of people were still waiting. Waiting for rescue. Waiting for hope. Waiting for someone to remember them. "We don't stop," she said. "That's not something we know how to do. So yes, Ensign. However long it takes, whatever it costs, we bring them all home." She turned back to the navigation display and set a course for the next target. There was work to be done. The ship turned toward Draxith space, its engines glowing in the darkness. Somewhere, slaves who had lost all hope looked up at the same stars and dared to dream of freedom. The hunt continued, and humanity never stopped coming.